We are, we're living through this really terrifying paradox right now. I mean, you're carrying literally the sum total of human knowledge in your pocket.
Right, right.
Yet, somehow, modern society is experiencing this massive, like, collective cognitive regression.
Oh, absolutely. We are totally drowning in high-speed data, but, we are completely starving for reality.
Yeah. And you see it every single day. Highly educated people, I mean, people who write code, trade stocks, build companies, they are falling for doomsday cults.
Oh, yeah. Buying mystical crystals to heal their bodies, or
Right, or millions of people who firmly believe they've been abducted by aliens.
billions. It's wild.
And yet these exact same people are totally, completely blind to the actual physical rules running the universe.
Well, we're suffering from an epidemic of intellectual laziness, really. I mean, it is the great vulnerability of our time. We've mapped the human genome, right? We've photographed black holes.
Yeah, which is incredible.
It is. But our primitive primate brains, they still desperately want to believe in fairy tales.
Because the truth is counterintuitive.
Exactly. And frankly, it's a bit frightening.
So today, we are staging a rescue mission for your mind. We are bypassing all that deafening noise of modern media, and we're getting down to the bedrock of how existence actually works.
The literal mechanics of reality.
Yes. Yeah. Our map for this deep dive is drawn from Richard Dawkins' work on how the world truly operates, specifically stripping away the supernatural to reveal the breathtaking mechanics of nature.
The goal here is basically to smash the crust of human ignorance.
I love that. Smashing the crust.
Right. We are going to expose the relentless lies your own brain tells you every single day. And we're going to replace those cheap myths with the profound, violent, and just beautiful reality of physics and biology.
And we are starting right now with the most fundamental lie of all, the illusion of the physical world.
This is a big one.
It is. So right now you are probably sitting down, or maybe you're leaning against a wall. Tap the surface next to you. It feels solid, right? It feels like an undeniable, immovable fact.
But your fingertips are totally lying to you.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that sensation of solid matter, it's a complete hallucination.
Okay, I have to challenge this right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Because if I hit my hand against a brick wall, it doesn't feel like a hallucination.
Sure, it hurts.
Yeah, it feels like a broken hand. So how can you sit there and say the physical world isn't real?
Well, the physical world is real, but your perception of it is entirely fabricated. You think you're touching a solid object, but you are actually interacting with a void.
A void.
A void. You, the chair you're sitting on, the phone in your hand, you are all 99.99% empty space.
99.99% empty space.
No, and that sounds like a philosophical riddle.
It's cold, hard physics.
Mm-hmm.
To understand it, we just have to discard our everyday human scale. You know?
Yeah.
We have to zoom in. Let's look at the hardest, most unyielding substance we know, a diamond.
Okay, the ultimate symbol of solid, unbreakable reality. It literally cuts glass. Exactly. A diamond is essentially a single, massive molecule made entirely of carbon atoms. And if you could see those atoms, they would look like they're lined up in a perfectly rigid, repeating three-dimensional grid.
Like a scaffold.
Right. Think of millions of highly trained soldiers standing at attention on a parade ground.
But they aren't standing shoulder to shoulder, are they?
Not even close. The scale of the emptiness between them is staggering. Let's build a visceral mental model here.
Let's do it.
Imagine we shrink you down and place you inside that diamond crystal. We scale up the dense center, the nucleus of a single carbon atom, until it's the size of a standard football sitting on the ground next to you.
Okay, so I'm standing next to a carbon nucleus, and it's a football.
Right. Now, you need to locate the electrons that belong to this atom. On this scale, the electrons are smaller than tiny gnats.
Gnats, like tiny bugs.
Tiny bugs. And they aren't buzzing around the surface of the football. To find them, you'd have to walk outward for 15 kilometers.
Wait, 15 kilometers? That's almost 10 miles.
Yes, the nucleus is here at your feet. The next closest nucleus, the next football in the diamond's rigid structure, is over 15 kilometers away.
Holy crap.
And what's between them? Just a few microscopic gnats flying around in an absolute cavernous void.
That is deeply unsettling. So if I scale that back up,
Right.
the diamond ring on a finger, steel beams in a skyscraper, the wood in a desk.
Yeah.
It's all just microscopic football separated by miles and miles of absolute nothingness.
Everything you touch. Yeah. Everything you are basically a ghostly framework of particles floating in an ocean of emptiness.
But hold on, let me stop you.
Yeah.
Because I'm 99.99% empty space.
Yeah.
And the wall in front of me is 99.99% empty space. Why can't I walk right through it?
That's the logical next question.
Right. If we're both just voids, it should be like two nets swinging through each other. I shouldn't be able to sit on a chair. I should fall straight through it to the center of the earth.
This is exactly where our intuition completely fails us. We assume solid means matter physically touching other matter. But matter never actually touches. What your brain translates as solid is actually just invisible electromagnetic repulsion.
Repulsion, like magnets pushing away from each other.
Precisely. Electrons carry a negative electrical charge. And as we know from playing with magnets, like charges repel.
Sure.
When you press your hand against a wall, the empty space of your hand isn't colliding with the empty space of the wall. What's actually happening is the electron clouds in your hand are getting close enough to the electron clouds in the wall that they violently repel each other.
Oh, wow. So my electrons are essentially screaming at the wall's electrons, refusing to share the same physical territory.
Yes. They are locked in an invisible electromagnetic shockwave. The force is so incredibly strong that it stops the atoms from passing through one another.
That is insane.
Your brain registers that repulsive magnetic force, sends a signal up your arm, and your mind just invents the concept of solid.
So solid isn't a physical state at all. It's just a biological translation of a force field. So you can walk through water because its molecular bonds are loose and the force fields slip over each other.
Right.
You can walk through air because the atoms are whizzing around freely. But a wall, the force fields are locked in a rigid grid.
You are never actually touching anything. You are hovering microscopic fractions of a millimeter above the chair you're sitting on, suspended by electromagnetic levitation.
That is a total slap in the face to common sense.
Eyewitness testimony from our own senses is completely unreliable.
So if our brains are entirely blind to the microscopic void that makes up our bodies, I guess we are equally blind to the macro scale.
Oh, absolutely.
We're completely incapable of comprehending the staggering depths of time that created us, which brings us to the ultimate illusion of human history.
Yeah, the human mind is totally obsessed with narratives. We want a clear beginning, middle, and end.
We want a starting line.
We want a starting line.
It feels like basic common sense. Like, if humans evolved from earlier primates, there must have been a first human. There must have been a specific midnight, a specific moment where an ancestor gave birth to the very first baby that could officially be called Homo sapiens.
It's a really compelling story, but it is a complete myth. There was never a first human being.
Okay, prepare to have your concept of history completely shattered. You, the person listening to this deep dive right now. If you trace your lineage back far enough, your 185 millionth great-grandfather was a fish.
And that's not a metaphor?
No.
A literal water-breathing, finned fish swimming in an ancient ocean.
Let's visualize how this is actually possible without there ever being a first of any species. Imagine a bookshelf. But this isn't a normal bookshelf.
Right, it's matter.
This bookshelf is 40 miles long, and packed tightly onto this shelf are 185 million photographs. One photo of your direct ancestor, generation by generation, stretching continuously all the way back in time.
And on the near end of the shelf, there is a photograph of you.
Right. You start walking down the shelf, you see a photo of your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather. You jog 1,000 years down the shelf.
Yeah.
That's roughly, what, your 40 greats-grandfather?
Yeah. And if you look at that photo, it's just a normal human. I mean, they might be wearing different clothes, maybe their diet gave them different teeth, but biologically, they are identical to you.
So you keep walking. You jog down the shelf for 1,000,000 years. You stop and pull out a photo. You are now looking at your 50,000 greats-grandfather. Now we see a massive physical change.
Yes. You are looking at a creature we call Homo erectus. The skull is significantly thicker.
Right.
The brow ridge is heavy, very pronounced. The brain cavity is smaller. This is definitively a different species. If a Homo erectus were alive today, you could not successfully reproduce with them.
But wait. If I am Homo sapiens, and my 50,000 greats-grandfather is Homo erectus, there has to be a photo somewhere in between them where the switch happened.
That's the intuition, yeah.
There must be a photo of the first Homo sapiens.
But there isn't. And this is the hardest thing for the human brain to grasp. If you pull any single photograph off that 40-mile shelf and you compare it to the photo directly to its left and the photo directly to its right, they look utterly identical.
Identical.
Every single baby ever born on Earth was the exact same species as its parents.
Let me push back on this because it feels like a total paradox. Every single baby is the exact same species as its mother. But 50,000 generations ago, they were an entirely different, incompatible species. How does a chain of identical links produce a completely different chain?
Think about the mechanics of human aging.
Okay.
You were once an infant. Today, you are an adult. Can you pinpoint the exact specific midnight when you stopped being a baby and became a toddler?
No. I mean, I woke up every single day of my childhood feeling exactly the same as the day before.
Right. Can you pinpoint the exact Tuesday that a middle-aged person becomes a senior citizen?
Definitely not.
The change is absolute. An infant is not an adult, but the daily progression is completely invisible. Evolution operates on the exact same mechanism of imperceptible, microscopic changes, just stretched over unimaginable depths of time.
Because DNA isn't a perfect photocopier.
Yeah.
Every time it copies itself, there are tiny typos, mutations. But they're so small they don't create a new species overnight.
Exactly. Asking who was the first human is a semantic trap. It's a game of human language, not a reflection of biology. We invented words like Homo erectus and Homo sapiens to neatly organize history for our own convenience.
Nature doesn't care about our labels.
Not at all. Nature is just a slow, continuous, unbroken flow of genetic code.
So you keep walking down that 40-mile shelf.
Yeah.
Past the creatures that look like apes, past the tiny shivering mammals that look like shrews hiding from dinosaurs.
Yep.
You walk all the way to the end of the 40 miles 185 million generations ago, and you pull out the last photo. And you are staring face to face with a fish.
And every single step of that 40-mile journey, a mother gave birth to a child, and they were identical enough to be exactly the same species. There are no sudden leaps, just a slow, relentless morphing.
This completely destroys the childish myth that humans were instantly snapped into existence by magic.
It does.
But it raises a massive question. If life flows in this singular, unbroken, incredibly slow chain, how did the chain shatter? Like, how do we now have millions of wildly different, totally incompatible species on the planet?
If immense time is the canvas of evolution, geographic isolation is the knife.
Geographic isolation. When we look at a rainforest or a coral reef, we see thousands of wildly specialized creatures. The human intuition is to assume a grand designer carefully painted each one to fit its specific environment.
But the true engine of diversity isn't a magical artist. It is physical separation.
To understand this, we need to look at how human languages fracture, actually.
And that's a perfect analogy. DNA is, at its core, an information system.
Right.
It is a language that must be shared and understood between two individuals to create offspring.
Right.
Just as human languages drift apart when populations are separated, gene pools drift apart when they stop mixing.
Look at the Roman Empire. 2,000 years ago, millions of people across Europe spoke Latin. But then the empire collapsed.
The roads were cut off.
Exactly. The populations were suddenly separated by mountain ranges, deep rivers, hostile borders. They stopped trading. They stopped talking to each other.
And when the flow of communication stops, the language starts to drift independently.
Over centuries, the Latin spoken by the isolated group in France mutated into French. The Latin spoken in the Italian peninsula mutated into Italian. Over enough time, the changes compounded so much that a French speaker and an Italian speaker could no longer understand each other.
Now apply that exact same mechanical logic to biology. When a physical barrier prevents two groups of the same animal from mating, the genetic flow stops. And when gene flow stops, species fracture.
And sometimes the physical barriers are created by violent freak accidents. There's an incredible historical record of this happening in real time. October 4th, 1995.
Oh, the Caribbean hurricanes.
Yes. Two massive hurricanes, Luis and Marilyn, rip through the Caribbean islands. They absolutely devastate the island of Guadeloupe, tearing up massive ancient trees and throwing them into the ocean.
And clinging for their lives in the branches of these trees were local green iguanas.
These uprooted trees form a massive tangled raft of debris. 15 green iguanas surfed this log raft for 160 miles across the violent open ocean.
160 miles.
Against all mathematical odds, after days at sea, the raft washes up on the pristine beaches of Anguilla. Local fishermen literally watched these exhausted iguanas crawl off the logs and onto the sand.
They survived a freak natural disaster, but chemically and biologically, their destiny just changed forever because they are now geographically isolated.
They can never swim back 160 miles to Guadeloupe. They can never mate with their old cousins again.
They have been genetically quarantined. Now let's scale this mechanism up to one of the most famous evolutionary laboratories on Earth, the Galapagos Islands.
The Galapagos are fascinating because they didn't break off from a mainland. They are volcanic rock that violently punched out of the floor of the Pacific Ocean. When they cooled, they were totally barren, blank slates.
Which means every single living thing on those islands had to arrive there by accident.
Surfing on logs, blown off course by storms, just like the iguanas in 1995.
Exactly. Millions of years ago, an ancestral iguana from South America washes up on one of these volcanic rocks. It survives. It reproduces. Because it is completely cut off from the mainland, its DNA begins to drift, adapting to the harsh volcanic environment.
Right.
But the true genius of the Galapagos isn't just that it's an island, it is an archipelago, a cluster of islands.
So you have a booming population of iguanas on Island A. They are totally isolated. But every few millennia, maybe another freak storm blows a tiny handful of them from Island A over to Island B.
This is a mechanism called the founder effect. You take a tiny random sample of the population, maybe just 2 or 3 iguanas, and dump them on a new island. They don't carry the full genetic diversity of Island A. They only have their specific genes.
So it's a genetic bottleneck.
Yes. And because sea crossings between the islands are incredibly rare, the iguanas on Island B are now isolated again. They have thousands of years to mutate, adapt, and drift before any more iguanas from Island A show up to mix the gene pool.
So let me make sure I'm grasping the absolute scale of this. You're saying that if I put a barrier, like an ocean or a deep canyon, between 2 identical groups of animals,
Yeah.
and I just leave them alone, eventually the random genetic typos and the pressure of their different environments will make them so chemically alienated from each other that they literally cannot reproduce anymore.
That is exactly what speciation is, and it goes to absolute extremes. Look at what happened to those iguanas on the Galapagos. Some of them got blown onto volcanic islands where there was absolutely no vegetation on the land. The only food source was thick beds of seaweed growing underwater in the ocean.
A land animal trapped on a rock with only underwater food. I mean, that sounds like an extinction event.
For most of them, it was. But biology is ruthless. Natural selection heavily favored the tiny variations in the population that allowed some iguanas to swim slightly better or hold their breath slightly longer. The ones that couldn't dive, starved to death, their genes were completely erased.
The ultimate brutal filter.
Over immense time, those land-dwelling iguanas physically mutated into marine iguanas. Today, they have flat tails for swimming, specialized glands to sneeze out excess salt water, and they dive deep into the freezing ocean to graze on algae.
Wow.
They exist nowhere else on the planet, and they are completely genetically incompatible with the land iguanas living just a few miles away.
That is staggering. And if you run that exact same mechanism back far enough, if you keep tracking the tectonic plates shifting, the oceans rising, the mountains separating populations,
You inevitably find that a human and a cockroach share a grand ancestor.
1 billion years ago, some bizarre microscopic creature was living on an ancient reef. An earthquake splits the reef. A deep, impassable ocean trench forms. One half of the family is completely isolated from the other half.
Right.
Billions of years of genetic drift, brutal survival, and relentless mutation happen. One half of that family tree mutates into insects, the other half mutates into vertebrates.
We are the product of geographical isolation, but we're also the product of an incredibly violent, lethal arms race.
Which brings us to a deeply emotional illusion. When a terrible tragedy strikes an earthquake, a devastating hurricane, a horrific disease, humanity has a primal instinct to look up at the sky and scream, "Why is this happening to me? Why is the universe so unfair?"
It's a deeply ingrained psychological need. We crave cosmic justice. We really want to believe that the universe has a moral arc, that good things happen to good people, and that bad things are a targeted punishment.
The terrifying truth is that the universe is entirely coldly indifferent to your existence. An earthquake is not angry. A hurricane doesn't have a vendetta. They are just the blind physics of a liquid earth and atmospheric pressure.
But while the inanimate universe doesn't care about you, there is something that is actively, aggressively trying to kill you.
Evolution.
Yeah. We must distinguish between inanimate disasters and animate enemies. The weather is blind. But a predator, a virus, a parasite, they are genetically programmed, highly specialized biological assassins.
To understand how this shaped our brains, let's talk about the evolution of paranoia. Because there are 2 ways to view the world: Sod's Law and the Pollyanna Principle.
Sod's law essentially dictates that if something can go wrong, it absolutely will. It's the belief that the universe is malicious.
Right.
The Pollyanna principle is the exact opposite. It's the eternal, sunny optimist. Everything happens for a reason and it will all be fine.
In a civilized modern society, the Pollyanna optimist is probably a happier person. But in the wild.
Oh, in the wild, the Pollyanna optimist gets eaten alive.
Let's visualize the mechanism here. Imagine two antelopes grazing on the ancient African savanna. They hear a sudden, sharp rustle in the tall grass.
Okay.
The Pollyanna antelope, the optimist, thinks, oh, it's probably just the wind. The savanna is the beautiful, safe place, and he goes right back to eating grass.
Now look at the Sod's Law antelope. This animal is deeply, fundamentally paranoid. It assumes the rustling grass is a leopard, and that leopard is executing a calculated ambush.
The paranoid antelope doesn't wait for confirmation. It experiences a massive spike of adrenaline and sprints away in absolute primal terror.
Now let's run the outcomes. If the rustling was just the wind, the paranoid antelope wasted a few calories running away. It looks a bit silly.
Sure.
But if the rustling actually was a leopard, the optimistic antelope is dead. Its genes are permanently deleted from the evolutionary pool.
And this happens generation after generation for millions of years. The optimists are constantly being called.
Yeah.
The only animals that survive to breed are the hyper-vigilant, anxious, deeply paranoid ones. And they pass those genes for anxiety directly into their offspring.
Including us. We are literally wired to think the world is out to get us. We see faces in the dark, we hear footsteps in the floorboards, we assume malice where there is only coincidence, because every single one of our ancestors was a paranoid survivor who narrowly escaped being murdered.
Our brains are advanced pattern recognition machines that have been aggressively calibrated for false positives. It is mathematically safer to see 100 fake predators than to miss one real one.
That's right.
But the predators aren't just hiding in the tall grass anymore. Let's pivot from the paranoia of our brains to the paranoia of our blood.
The enemy inside.
We're taught from childhood that the human immune system is our guardian angel, a gentle, benevolent shield keeping us safe from germs.
That is a very dangerous romanticization. The immune system is not a gentle shield. It is a hypersensitive, heavily armed, brutally aggressive biological military force. And like any highly paranoid army, it is completely capable of catastrophic friendly fire.
This is the tragic trade-off of our biology. Why does eating a microscopic fragment of a peanut cause someone's throat to swell up and kill them within minutes?
Allergies. Your immune system is tasked with distinguishing between friendly human cells and lethal foreign invaders. It uses white blood cells, macrophages, and T cells to patrol the bloodstream.
Like soldiers on patrol.
Right. But sometimes its threat detection algorithm overfits the data. It encounters a totally harmless pollen grain or a peanut protein, and it makes a catastrophic miscalculation.
It's the paranoid antelope again.
Right.
The immune system hears a biological rustle in the grass, assumes the peanut is a lethal weaponized pathogen, and detonates the body's entire defense arsenal.
Yeah, it floods the system with histamine, causing the airways to close to prevent the invader from spreading. It essentially strangles you to save you.
The paranoia kills the host. But sometimes it's even more insidious than a peanut. Sometimes the immune system decides that you are the enemy.
Autoimmune diseases.
Exactly. Conditions where the biological army turns its weapons on its own citizens. The body attacks its own hair follicles, causing alopecia. Or it relentlessly attacks its own skin cells, causing the painful, scaly patches of psoriasis. Or it attacks the joints in rheumatoid arthritis.
It's horrible.
I have to ask the obvious question here. Evolution is a ruthless optimizer. Why would natural selection tolerate a system so incredibly flawed that it destroys the body from the inside out? Why is the trigger so horrifyingly sensitive?
This is where we dive into one of the most fascinating hypotheses from our sources. It has to do with the ultimate biological enemy, a threat so terrifying that the immune system has no choice but to be permanently dialed up to maximum paranoia.
Cancer.
Yes, we often think of cancer as a disease we catch, but cancer isn't a foreign invader, it is our own cells going rogue.
A cell suffers a genetic mutation, breaks its programming, refuses to die, and begins multiplying endlessly, becoming an aggressive parasite feeding on our own tissues.
And because they are our own cells, they are incredibly dangerous. They are wearing the exact same uniform as our biological army. They have the right ID badges. They are perfectly camouflaged.
So the immune system has an impossibly difficult job. It can't just look for obvious foreign bacteria. It has to deeply interrogate every single cell in the body, looking for the subtlest hint of a rogue mutation.
It requires a level of ruthless vigilance that borders on the impossible. The hypothesis is this: your body is engaged in a lifelong, invisible, brutal shadow war against cancer. Every single day, precancerous cells are forming in your body.
Every day.
Every day. And every single day, your highly tuned immune system is hunting them down and assassinating them before they can form a tumor.
So what does this shadow war have to do with allergies and autoimmune diseases?
Autoimmune diseases might be the tragic accidental crossfire of this war. In order to catch a perfectly camouflaged cancer cell, the immune system's threat detection threshold has to be set on a microscopic hair trigger.
It has to be so aggressive, so willing to shoot first and ask questions later, that it inevitably makes mistakes. It attacks healthy hair or skin or joints, because the alternative, missing a single cancer cell, is certain death.
It is a blind, mechanical trade-off. Your body is fighting so incredibly hard to save your life from cancer that it accidentally tortures you with psoriasis or allergies.
There's no fairness in this system.
Yeah.
There's no cosmic justice. There is only the brutal mathematics of survival.
Survival at all costs.
This brings us to a really profound realization. Our biology is wired for extreme paranoia. Our white blood cells attack harmless peanuts. And our brains are wired to see patterns and random noise and to desperately invent explanations for things that terrify us.
Which completely explains one of the greatest, most bizarre mass delusions in modern history.
Alien abductions. We aren't talking about ancient folklore here. Nearly 4 million Americans living in the age of smartphones and space stations firmly claim they have been abducted by extraterrestrials. They describe being taken out of their beds, pulled into glowing ships, subjected to horrific medical probes, and then having their memories wiped.
The true terror here isn't that little gray men from Alpha Centauri are secretly visiting Earth. The real horror is what this phenomenon reveals about the fragile, glitchy nature of human consciousness.
Why are so many level-headed, educated people utterly convinced they've met aliens? Let's talk about the cult of science fiction and how it overrides physical reality. Remember Heaven's Gate?
Oh, 1997. 39 members of a religious cult dressed in identical black tracksuits and committed mass suicide in California.
Why? Because they believed a massive alien spacecraft was hiding in the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet, waiting to take their souls to the next level of existence.
It's just so tragic.
They were so committed to this belief that they bought an expensive telescope to look for the ship. When they looked through the lens and only saw a comet, they didn't question their belief. They returned the telescope to the store, claiming it was broken.
Their internal narrative completely overrode empirical reality. And while Heaven's Gate is an extreme, tragic example, it exists on the exact same psychological spectrum as the millions of people who believe they've been abducted in the middle of the night.
So mechanically, biologically, how does a perfectly sane person wake up and believe they were kidnapped by a UFO? What is the glitch?
It almost always originates from a very real, intensely terrifying biological misfire called sleep paralysis.
Yeah. Okay, let's break down the exact mechanism of this, because anyone who has experienced it knows it is pure nightmare fuel.
It really is. When you go to sleep and enter the REM stage rapid eye movement, this is when your brain generates vivid, immersive dreams. But if you were to physically act out those dreams, you would thrash around, fall out of bed, and seriously injure yourself.
So the brain has a built-in safety switch.
Yes. A region in the brainstem called the pons sends chemical signals down your spinal cord, temporarily severing the connection between your brain and your voluntary muscles. It physically paralyzes you. It's called REM atonia.
So you are safely locked inside your body while your mind runs a simulation.
But sometimes the sequence glitches. You wake up, your conscious mind boots up, you open your eyes, and you are completely aware of your dark bedroom. But the chemical switch in your brainstem hasn't flipped off yet. The paralysis is still active.
You are trapped, fully awake, inside a paralyzed corpse. You can't move your arms, you can't turn your head, you can't even open your mouth to scream.
It induces a feeling of absolute primal vulnerability. And because your brain is caught in this chemical twilight zone between the dreaming world and the waking world, the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, panics.
The paranoid antelope brain kicks in. I am paralyzed. I cannot move. Therefore, a massive predator must be holding me down.
Exactly. The brain demands an explanation for the paralysis, and because it is still partially dreaming, it hallucinates one. It conjures an entity in the room to match the terror. Now, what's truly fascinating is how human culture dictates the specific hallucination.
The cultural Rolodex, this is the smoking gun. In the Middle Ages, long before science fiction or movies, people experienced sleep paralysis just as often as we do. But they never saw aliens.
No, they saw demons. They hallucinated an incubus or a succubus sitting heavily on their chest, crushing the breath out of them. In Newfoundland, the local culture called the hallucination the old hag.
The old hag.
Yeah. In Indochina, it was the gray ghost. If you live in Eastern Europe, you might hallucinate a vampire.
Whatever monster your specific culture told you to fear, your panicked brain automatically manifested it at the foot of your bed.
Now, fast forward to the 20th and 21st centuries. We don't believe in demons as much anymore, but our subconscious is endlessly bombarded with pop culture. Star Trek, the X-Files, comic books, movies. We are heavily, constantly primed with the imagery of gray aliens with massive, black, wraparound eyes.
So a modern person wakes up paralyzed. The brain panics, frantically searches its cultural database for mysterious intruder, pulls out a gray alien, and literally projects a holographic hallucination of that alien right into the bedroom.
The experience feels 100% physically real to the victim. They aren't lying. Their brain lied to them.
But the delusion doesn't stop in the bedroom. It gets cemented into history when they go seeking answers from therapists or hypnotists.
This is where we introduce false memory syndrome.
The victim goes to a hypnotist, confused about a terrifying nightmare. And the hypnotist, who probably already believes in UFOs, starts asking leading questions.
Were you taken out of your room? Were you on a ship? Were the entities gray? Did they have big black eyes? Did they touch you?
Because human memory isn't a video recording. It's shockingly fragile. Every single time you recall a memory, you aren't replaying it. You are actively reconstructing it from scratch.
And when a trusted authority figure repeatedly asks highly specific leading questions while you are in a vulnerable state, they are quite literally rewriting your neural pathways.
Or planting a script.
Exactly. The brain desperately wants to please the authority figure and resolve the confusing trauma. So it builds a completely fake memory of an abduction, layer by layer, detail by detail.
They weave the hallucination into their actual history until the victim would easily pass a lie detector test, swearing they were probed on a spaceship.
We invent supernatural magic to explain the glitches in our own biology. It is intellectual cowardice.
We are so terrified of the unknown, so desperate for an explanation, that we will accept a science fiction horror story over a simple chemical misfire in the brainstem. But our biological glitches are just the beginning.
Right.
The very ground we stand on is deceiving us.
The illusion of stability.
We constantly use phrases like solid ground or bedrock to describe the most reliable, permanent things in existence. But the Earth, well, it's actually a liquid.
We live our entire lives on a razor-thin, fragile crust of rock. Beneath that incredibly thin shell, the Earth is a boiling, agonizingly slow-moving ocean.
Tectonic surfing. Let's get into the mechanics of this because it's mind-blowing.
The Earth's core is intensely hot, driven by the decay of radioactive elements left over from the birth of the solar system. This immense heat radiates outward into the mantle, the massive layer of rock between the core and the crust.
Okay.
Now, the mantle isn't liquid magma like the lava that flows out of a volcano. It is solid rock, but under such unimaginable heat and immense pressure, it behaves plastically. It flows like thick, boiling treacle.
Convection currents. The hot rock from the deep mantle rises slowly toward the surface, cools down, and then sinks back down over millions of years.
And floating on top of these incredibly powerful convection currents are the rigid, broken tectonic plates of the Earth's crust. The continents aren't anchored. They are rafts floating on a subterranean ocean of churning rock.
And these massive continental rafts are constantly crashing into each other, pulling apart, or grinding past one another.
That is exactly what an earthquake is. For centuries, humans thought earthquakes were the footsteps of angry giants or the judgment of a furious god. It is simply the blind friction of massive rock plates.
Let's make this beautifully visceral. Look at the San Andreas Fault in California. Los Angeles sits on the Pacific Plate. San Francisco sits on the North American Plate.
Right. The churning mantle below is dragging the Pacific Plate northwest, while the North American Plate moves south. They are grinding against each other.
Which means the city of Los Angeles is literally physically sliding toward San Francisco. Right now, as we speak. At what speed?
At roughly the exact same speed that your fingernails grow.
Let that sink in. You can look at your hand, watch your fingernails grow over a month, and realize that entire megacities, mountains, and millions of people are drifting across the surface of the planet at that exact pace.
And because the edges of these plates are jagged rock, they don't slide smoothly. They get stuck. The The convection currents keep pushing, building up unimaginable tension over centuries.
The rubber band stretching.
Yes, until finally the rock shatters. The tension releases all at once. The ground ripples like water.
A violent, blind physical reality. No angry gods required.
Exactly. But if we are trapped on these shifting plates, blind to the microscopic voids inside us and hallucinating false memories, how can we possibly know the truth about the vast universe around us?
This brings us to one of the most elegant scientific discoveries in human history. How we cracked the cosmic code without ever leaving our planet. The barcode of the universe.
We are talking about light, and specifically the rainbow.
For thousands of years, a rainbow was considered pure magic, a bridge for the gods, or a divine promise painted in the sky. But Isaac Newton shattered that myth.
Newton used a simple glass prism to prove that white light isn't a single thing. It is a dense mixture of every color in the visible spectrum. The prism simply bends the different wavelengths at slightly different angles, separating the white light into a rainbow.
But the real magic, the poetic magic, happened when scientists started looking at that rainbow really closely, using a tool called the spectrometer.
When you take the light from our sun, pass it through a narrow slit, and spread it out into a wide, highly detailed rainbow, you notice something shocking. The rainbow isn't a perfect, smooth gradient of color. It has gaps in it.
Distinct, sharp black lines cutting vertically across the colors, like a barcode.
These are called Fraunhofer lines, and they are the key to unlocking the composition of the universe. To understand them, we have to go back to the atomic scale.
Back to the footballs and the gnats.
Exactly. Atoms are made of a nucleus surrounded by orbiting electrons. But electrons don't just orbit anywhere. They are strictly confined to specific, fixed orbits, like the rungs of a ladder.
They can be on rung 1 or rung 2, but they can never exist in the space between the rungs.
Now, when light, which is made of tiny packets of energy called photons, travels out from the hot core of a star, it has to pass through the cooler outer atmosphere of that star. The atoms in that atmosphere are hungry for energy.
And here's the mechanical genius of it. An electron can absorb a photon to jump up to a higher rung on its ladder. But it can only absorb a photon that has the exact, precise amount of energy needed to make that specific jump.
And because different colors of light carry different amounts of energy, an atom of hydrogen will only absorb very specific, exact colors of light. An atom of iron will absorb entirely different colors.
So when the starlight finally reaches Earth and we run it through a prism, the colors that were absorbed by the star's atmosphere are missing. They show up as pitch black lines in the rainbow.
It is a chemical fingerprint. Every single element in the periodic table absorbs a totally unique pattern of black lines. By reading this cosmic barcode, we can look at a star billions of light years away and know with absolute mathematical certainty exactly what gases it is burning.
We know what the universe is made of simply by looking at the gaps in a rainbow.
But the barcode revealed something even more profoundly terrifying than the composition of stars. It revealed the age and the fate of the entire universe.
Which leads us to the Doppler effect and the ultimate expansion of reality.
Everyone has experienced the Doppler effect with sound. You're standing on a sidewalk, and an ambulance drives past you with its sirens blaring. As it comes toward you, the pitch of the siren sounds very high.
Because the ambulance is chasing its own sound waves, compressing them together. Tighter waves mean a higher pitch.
But the moment it passes you and speeds away, the pitch noticeably drops. Because it is driving away from the sound waves, stretching them out. Longer waves mean a lower pitch.
Now apply that exact same mechanism to light, because light is also a wave.
In the 1920s, astronomer Edwin Hubble was looking at the barcodes, the spectral lines of distant galaxies. He knew what the barcode for hydrogen was supposed to look like. But when he looked at these galaxies, the black lines were in the wrong place. They were all shifted toward the red end of the rainbow.
Redshift.
Red light has the longest wavelength in the visible spectrum. If the light from a galaxy is stretching out, getting longer and redder, it means the galaxy is moving away from us.
Just like the ambulance siren dropping in pitch. But here is the mind-bending part. Hubble realized that almost every single galaxy he looked at was redshifted. Everything was flying away from us. And the farther away the galaxy was, the faster it was receding.
The universe isn't static. It is expanding in all directions at terrifying speed. The very fabric of space between the galaxies is stretching like a rubber band.
And if you take that expansion and you logically run the film backward...
If everything is flying apart today, it means yesterday it was closer together. 1,000,000 years ago, it was much closer. If you run the math backward to the absolute limit, All the matter and energy in the entire universe collapses into a single, infinitely dense, infinitely hot point.
The Big Bang. We know with staggering precision that the universe began roughly 13.8 billion years ago, not because a myth told us so, but because we can literally measure the stretching of the rainbow barcode.
Which brings us to the most poetic truth of all. If the Big Bang created the universe, where did we come from? Where did the carbon in our DNA, the oxygen in our lungs, and the iron in our blood originate?
Because the Big Bang didn't create iron. It only created the simplest elements, hydrogen and a little bit of helium.
To get the heavy, complex atoms required to build a human body, you need a furnace of unimaginable pressure and violence. You need a star to die.
Section 12, stellar murder.
A star is a delicate balance of two massive forces. Gravity is constantly trying to crush the star inward, collapsing it under its own staggering weight. But in the deep core, the pressure is so intense that hydrogen atoms are violently smashed together to form helium. This nuclear fusion releases a colossal outward explosion of energy.
So the outward explosion perfectly balances the inward crush of gravity. The star is stable.
For billions of years, yes. But eventually, a massive star runs out of hydrogen fuel. The outward pressure drops. Gravity instantly starts winning, crushing the star even tighter. The core gets so hot that it starts fusing helium into carbon, then carbon into oxygen, then neon, silicon. It keeps forging heavier and heavier elements to fight off gravity.
Until it hits the ultimate dead end. Iron.
Fusing iron doesn't release energy, it absorbs it. The moment a star's core turns to iron, the nuclear furnace completely shuts off. The outward pressure drops to zero.
And the entire staggering mass of the star, millions of times heavier than the Earth, instantly collapses inward at a fraction of the speed of light.
It slams into the iron core with such apocalyptic force that it violently rebounds. The star explodes in a supernova. For a few brief weeks, that single dying star will outshine the entire galaxy.
And in the unimaginable heat and pressure of that explosive shockwave, the heaviest elements in the universe are forged. Gold, uranium, and all the building blocks of life.
The explosion violently ejects these newly minted atoms out into the deep void of space. Over billions of years, those clouds of stardust slowly drift together, condense, and form new planets.
Saying we are made of stardust sounds like a cheesy greeting card, but it is a cold, violent, literal physical fact. Every single atom of iron carrying oxygen through your bloodstream right now was forged in the agonizing, catastrophic death of a supergent star billions of years ago.
Without the catastrophic murder of stars, the universe would be nothing but cold clouds of hydrogen gas. There would be no rock, no water, and no biology.
Reality is so much more epic than magic, which brings us back down to Earth and equips us with the ultimate weapon to destroy human ignorance.
If we understand the vast mechanical majesty of the universe, how do we evaluate the petty, local claims of miracles?
If someone runs up to you on the street and claims they just saw a man walk on water, or turn water into wine, or rise from the dead, how do you scientifically and logically dismantle their claim in 10 seconds?
We use the miracle equation. This is a concept originally formulated by the 18th century philosopher David Hume, and it is the ultimate logical razor.
Let's lay it out.
Hume stated that no testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle unless the testimony is of such a kind that its falsehood would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish.
That's a bit dense. Let's translate that into visceral logic.
To believe a miracle has occurred, you must weigh two probabilities on a scale. On one side of the scale, you have the probability that the fundamental absolute laws of physics, gravity, thermodynamics, chemistry, suddenly broke down for one specific person.
On the other side of the scale,
The probability that the person telling you the story is hallucinating, or lying for attention, or falling for a clever stage trick.
so if someone says, "I saw a prophet levitate," Hume asks you to weigh the options. What is mathematically more likely? That the curvature of space-time and the mass of the Earth temporarily cease to generate gravity in one small room? Or that a human being, a species famous for lying, inventing myths, and misinterpreting data, is simply telling a lie?
Since human beings lie and hallucinate constantly, as we proved with the alien abduction phenomena, the probability of falsehood is astronomically high. The probability of physics breaking is essentially zero. Therefore, the miracle is always mathematically a myth.
But people get tripped up by probability. They see a rare event and assume it must be magic.
Yeah.
I want to dive into the playing card analogy because it completely shatters how we view miracles in our daily lives.
It's a beautiful demonstration of how our brains project meaning onto random noise. Imagine you are playing a game of cards. You deal a hand of 13 cards to yourself, you flip them over, and you have exactly 13 spades, a perfect, flawless suit.
You would lose your mind. You would gasp, take a picture, and tell everyone you know. You would think the universe was sending you a magical sign.
Because mathematically, the chance of dealing exactly 13 spades is 1 in roughly 53 sextillion, an insanely, almost unthinkably huge number.
It's basically impossible.
But here's the psychological trap. Every single hand of 13 cards you ever deal has the exact same probability. 1 in 53 sextillion.
Let me make sure I'm getting this. If I deal a completely random garbage hand of cards, a 3 of clubs, a 7 of diamonds, a jack of spades, totally mismatched, that exact specific garbage hand was just as statistically improbable as the perfect hand of spades.
Exactly. The universe just shuffled the deck and handed you an outcome. We only apply the word magic or miracle when the cards happen to fall into a pattern that our human brains recognize. The universe doesn't care about spades. The miracle is entirely fabricated by your own pattern-seeking psychology.
So taking a massive box of IKEA furniture parts, wood panels, glass, hundreds of specific screws and hinges. You shake the box violently and dump it on the floor.
There are trillions of ways those parts can fall into a useless, chaotic pile of junk.
And only one exact way they can fall together to perfectly assemble into a working cabinet. Expecting a supernatural miracle is like expecting to shake the box and have the cabinet build itself. It violates the fundamental laws of entropy.
The universe does not build cabinets by shaking boxes. It builds complexity through billions of years of slow, blind, relentless natural selection.
We have dismantled the physical world around you. We've shown you that the solid chair you're sitting on is a hallucination of electromagnetic force fields. We've shown you that your history is an unbroken 185 million generation chain of mutated fish.
We've exposed your immune system as a paranoid army fighting a shadow war against cancer, and your most terrifying nightmares as chemical glitches in your brainstem.
So where does this leave us? We started this deep dive by stating we were going to replace cheap myths with poetic magic.
Our sources expertly categorize human wonder into 3 types of magic. The first is supernatural magic: spells, wizards, divine interventions. This is an intellectual dead end. It is the childish cowardice of looking at a complex universe and saying, I don't understand it, so a ghost must have done it. It stops all investigation.
The second is stage magic. Clever illusions designed specifically to hack the flaws in human perception. Fun, entertaining, but ultimately a deliberate deception.
The third, and only one that matters, is poetic magic. The exhilarating, goosebump-inducing, tear-jerking reality of scientific discovery.
Why would you ever settle for a fake supernatural miracle from an ancient book when the actual physics of the universe are so much more violent, beautiful, and infinitely complex?
Why invent a myth about a creator snapping his fingers when you can understand that your blood is made of iron forged in the apocalyptic explosion of a dying star? Truth is far stranger and far more magnificent than any fiction a human brain could ever invent.
But understanding this truth comes with a cost. It strips away the comforting blankets of childhood. It forces you to realize that the universe doesn't care about you. It runs on cold, unbreakable physics.
You are a temporary collection of stardust, floating on a razor-thin crust of liquid rock, navigating a biological system that is actively decaying.
We are leaving you with a final, provocative challenge today, a challenge directed entirely at you, the listener.
We have proven that your senses lie to you. We have proven that your memories can be entirely fabricated.
So ask yourself this: what deeply held, unquestioned common sense belief are you clinging to right now, simply because your primitive, paranoid primate brain is too terrified to see the world as it actually is?